Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of whether or not Thor Love and Thunder actually might work better in 2025. Now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline book won't be out for another month. However, if you saw my earlier video, you know that Amazon.com released the index for the book. And if you look really closely at the index, yeah, you can pretty much figure out the entire timeline. So we now know that the main part of the movie is going to be in October of 2025. And I know a lot of folks had it on their timelines, not only in 2024, but in May of 2024. So we're going to look at whether or not this October of 2025 setting might actually be better. So let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Now, I also like to remind folks that we do have a contest running throughout the month of September. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. The winner will be announced in early October and can choose from one of these three books. So, best of luck. Okay, so again, the other video went into much more detail, but regarding Love and Thunder, notice the Mighty Thor, a la Jane Foster, becomes Mighty Thor on page 301, which is in the April timeframe, right after Moon Knight and right before Wakanda Forever. And then that Gore, being the main villain, we can definitely see then when his battle is occurring, page 318 to 23. And that's in between Miss Marvel, which ends in September, and Werewolf by Night, which starts in October. So that puts the main part of the movie firmly in October. Okay, so that means that her blood test, which we knew was in April, right, from the date, but it's April of 2025. And that's when she takes her final blood test. Then the movie jumps forward to October of 2025. And Jane basically fills that gap by saying she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 6 months ago. Now, some people have interpreted this to mean 6 months prior to the April 30th date is when she first found out about her cancer. She then headed straight to New Asgard, and that's why the movie on many timelines is in May of in 2024 in some cases, or 2025, but still in May. But I have always looked at this and thought she meant it was 6 months ago from right now, from the time she's talking to Thor. So in other words, if you look at the rest of her quote, she says, I was feeling tired, and then they told me I have stage 4, get my affairs in order, and then I heard Milner calling me, so I thought, if science isn't working, maybe Viking space magic. So in other words, she's filling the gap from the time from that April 30th blood test to right now. So we're in October of 2025. Okay, so I like that because that means she's been Mighty Thor for like 5 months, 6 months, which is great. You know, instead of her just being Mighty Thor for a month or less, she's been Mighty Thor for a while. And does that fit with the lines in the movie? I think it does. Because when Thor arrives in New Asgard, Jane has been an established member of the community. They all knew her, etc. She hadn't just shown up, let's say. Jane had had enough time to try a lot of catchphrases. That's what something Valkyrie explained. Jane and Valkyrie have had time to become very close friends, which is great. Jane described Gore as my first bad guy, but that means like that's the first villain she fought. But obviously she helped other people because Valkyrie tells Thor that saving lives she's quite good at. Then the only thing that probably made people think she hadn't been Mighty Thor for long is Valkyrie says Jane's only been Thor for a minute. But then again, you got to consider these are Asgardians that live for thousands of years. So yeah, she only has been for a minute, even if it's 6 months. So I think this really fits. And again, I really like the fact that she was Mighty Thor for a long time, not just a short bit. Also, this works well with the line in She-Hulk, because that means she was actually alive and being Mighty Thor in August of 2025, which is when the infamous Lady Thor line was said in She-Hulk. So I like that. It fits really well. I think it fits better than if it was in 2024. Because it overlaps literally with She-Hulk. All right, so then finally, Thor and Jane meet up in October of 2025. And I think it works from a weather standpoint, because if you remember when they then leave to go after Gore, you see a lot of the villagers, etc., standing around, and you know they're in warm clothing to keep them warm. So a fall setting works. Of course, in Norway, it's always cold, probably. But nonetheless, this works with a fall setting, an October setting. And it is important to note this shot, which was seen in a lot of the trailers, doesn't actually appear in the movie. It's very green there, and that probably wouldn't work in October, but it worked maybe better in May, for example, why people might have thought May. But this is not actually in the movie. It's a deleted scene. Okay, so why did Thor and Jane have a different timing on their breakup? Remember, Jane said, what's it been, like 3-4 years? And Thor just rattles off 8 years, 7 months, and 6 days. Of course, the difference is because Jane was blipped. I love that. So we kind of get that indicated just through this dialogue. But more importantly, we can then back up the 8 years, 7 months, and 6 days to learn the month when their breakup occurred. So if he's discussing it in October 2025, that means March of 2017 is when they had their breakup. Okay, so does that work? Because I know some people have said, no, I don't like that date. So let's talk about why I really think it works just fine. First of all, it puts it pretty close, relatively speaking, to when Thor returns to Earth for Ragnarok and people are mentioning to him, like, hey, sorry to hear that Jane dumped you. I kind of like that because if it was in March that he was dumped, the public would eventually find out. And this was relatively fresh information for them to bring up. If it was a whole year earlier, I always thought it was a little weird. They're still talking about it. You might. He's famous, but still, it's much more fresh for them to mention it here. So I like that. Okay, so I do believe the beginning of their dating, and these are all from the scenes in the movie recounting their dating, I believe it started right after Thor the Dark World. So starting in the upper left-hand corner, in January of 2014, we see them doing their little breakfast together, and then they're punching each other with the silly fist things. They're rollerblading, they're doing skill games, they're watching a scary movie. Then the only time we really know for certain the date, because most of these are just kind of spread out randomly. Hopefully the timeline book will put something to all of them, but I kind of doubt it. So this is just for fun. But certainly the hot dog costumes, we know that's in October of 2014. That fits perfectly. And then in November, the next day, is when he wakes up and tells Mjolnir to always protect Jane and ends up putting the spell on it. Then he sees the baby and starts thinking about, their life together. They're watching movies now, and you can see Thor is a little more concerned, thinking about their future. Likewise, Jane is a little more concerned there in January 2015. Then things start to get in the way. Thor's taken off to go work with Fury. Jane is off doing speaking engagements. So that's kind of the January through March of 2015. Then, April through July, we see from the flashbacks that Jane is now appearing on multiple magazines, and this is overlapping with Age of Ultron, perfectly overlapping, when Thor was bragging, saying her work on the Convergence has made her the world's foremost astronomer, even that there's talk that Jane might be getting a Nobel Prize. Amazing. And then a news ticker on WHIH, which came out around the time of Age of Ultron, tells us renowned astrophysicist Jane Foster to lecture on her experiences with inner space. So Jane was really busy, number one. On the other hand, Thor was really busy because at the end of Age of Ultron, he takes off to go search for the stones, right? The Mind Stone is the fourth of the Infinity Stones to show up in the last few years. So it's time for him to take off, and I think he's going to be gone for a while. A little WHIH news ticker said, or tweet said, on June 1st, notice of 2015, said, "Where's Thor gone? Demigod Avenger seems to be missing. No more thunder." So, yeah, I think he takes off, and he's trying to figure out where the stones are. Now, what really confused stuff is when Ragnarok came out, one of my favorite movies, love Ragnarok, so we're talking November 2017, Thor recounts the Infinity Stone search, and he says, "Then I went searching through the cosmos for some magic, colorful Infinity Stone things." So that kind of implied that he did it for 2 years solid. He left at the end of Age of Ultron, didn't return to Earth, then finally until Thor Ragnarok. But he doesn't say that. He just says he went off to search for them, that clearly that was a major thing he needed to do, but he doesn't say he never went back to Earth. We do know he was not there during Civil War, right, which is May to June of 2016, because Thunderbolt Ross says, "Do you know where Thor and Banner are right now?" And of course, they did not. So wherever he was off-world at this point, probably searching for the stones, right? So as long as he was off-world during the duration of this movie, there's no reason he can't come back to Earth again. In fact, we see during the portion of their dating relationship where things are falling apart, which we're about to get to, basically Thor was, working with Heimdall to show up, have a date, and leave. So he was on Earth, back to Asgard again. On Earth, back to Asgard again. In fact, you can see it outside the window there, the colored effects. So yeah, there's just no reason this wouldn't work. And then I think it's also interesting in Ragnarok, even Doctor Strange didn't know how to reach him. He says, and you don't have a phone. So basically, Thor was off-world for the most part, but he would come in, do a date with Jane, take off. So here's the second half of their relationship where I think things really fell apart. I'm going to guess he was off Earth well after Civil War and Age of Ultron. So notice November 2016, he finally starts coming back. But you can see then there's times when he's gone and Jane is sitting there by herself. Then in December 2016, they're together but not happy. Then we actually see Thor trying to celebrate with a little pancake breakfast, and Jane's not there. And then when she does come back, they argue. Then in March of 2017, that's that scene where he's taking off, and finally she writes the note and he gets it. And then October of 2025, back to present day. I think this fits perfectly. The key is the few times he came to Earth after Civil War, he was here and gone, here and gone, here and gone. And, some people have said, well, he didn't know the Avengers broke up, so he couldn't come back to Earth again. No one mentioned it for whatever reason. No one told him the Avengers broke up. So then when he shows up in Ragnarok with Hulk, he doesn't bring up that the Avengers have broken up. So anyway, tell me what you think, but I have zero issue with him coming back to Earth after Civil War as long as he was just there, have a date, take off. Okay, so very high level then. This is everything that happened in his complex, yet I think it works perfect, timeline. So during the year 2014 was when their dating was good. It was working good. March of 2015, that's when they both started to get busy. She's doing her speaking. He's doing Age of Ultron. Civil War happens. He's gone. Then he comes back. Their relationship falls apart. He comes back then for Ragnarok in November of 2017. And finally, she does her blood test in April of 2025, and they meet again in October of 2025. Whew. I mean, it fits perfectly, I think. But yeah, it is complex. I mean, there's a lot going on with Thor. But anyway, tell me what you think. Okay, so let's look at some additional reasons that I actually think 2025 works better than 2024. One of them is Darcy and her timing. On the left, you see her in Westview, which was November of 2023. And on the right, we now know that she was spending time with Jane in April of 2025. Now, would it have worked in April of 2024? Yeah, it would have. She was probably done wrapping things up with Westview by then. But I still like having a little bit of distance here, so that there's just no chance that those two storylines overlap at all. I mean, WandaVision as a series was done, but I would think Darcy would have a lot of things to close down on that craziness with the Hex. So anyway, I like having a little distance here. I like Thor having more time to get his God bod back. Maybe he has a wonderful metabolism and he could have got it done by April, May of 2024, but I think having a longer amount of time works even better. Now this, I think, is a main reason. I just don't see any way that we could see tourism to blossom as quickly as it would have to in 2024. So on the left is what Norway looked like, New Asgard looked like during Endgame. On the right is what the world looked like during Endgame. Everything was a disaster, right? Now we know when Jane shows up in New Asgard, however, that this is what it looked like. I just don't see this happening by April of 2024. I just don't see it happening. 3 cruise ships, the world looking like it's normal, people spending lots of excess cash to go to Norway and to go see New Asgard. I just don't see it. Also, keep in mind, the state of the world was still a mess in April of 2024. This is when Falcon and the Winter Soldier was going on. And I think a big example of why this would be tough is they're saying the GRC formally began drafting legislation known as the Patch Act, which would seek to restore traditional border regulations. Because remember, the countries had no borders, pretty much, during the blip, which is wild. Well, now they're putting them back. Well, that's going to make international travel really hard. So to think 3 cruise ships full of people, I don't know. Just seems tough. So anyway, I like it much better in 2025 instead of 2024 because of that. Also, this is minor, but still it fits. There's the No Way Home Easter egg. The news ticker, this would have been in July of 2024, and it says political turmoil continues in New Asgard. Not that it's starting, it continues. So again, it just doesn't seem like there'd be all that tourism and things run nice and rosy. It feels like it needed time for Valkyrie to get control in New Asgard, and then for them to build up the tourism that we see. Okay, so in general, why do I think 2025 works better than 2024? Well, it places the breakup closer to Thor Ragnarok when the girls were approaching him and telling him, hey, sorry about the breakup. It gives more space between Love and Thunder and WandaVision. It places Love and Thunder after the borders were restored, well after the borders were restored in April of 2024. It places Love and Thunder after the political turmoil in July of 2024, allows time for tourism to boom, allows Thor to get in shape, and places Love and Thunder so that Lady Thor is still alive when the reference is made in She-Hulk. So, yeah, I just think all those reasons fit. However, nothing ever fits perfectly, right? I see 2 issues with the 2025. The first is, does that mean Thor was with the Guardians for 2 years, from October of 2023 to October of 2025? Well, here's what's funny. First of all, James Gunn, in a tweet, answered a question, and notice at the bottom is his answer. And he says, they weren't with Thor for more than a few weeks. So James Gunn thinks Thor and the Guardians were only together for a few weeks. On the other hand, Taika Waititi, Taika Waititi says, I think probably the number of years since we've seen Endgame. It's probably 4 years, right? So on one hand, James Gunn says they're together for a few weeks, and Taika Waititi says 4 years. How about we split it down the middle with 2? But seriously, I think they weren't together for 2 solid years. I mean, they're a team, and Thor was a loose member of that team. I bet they just got together whenever they needed to get together. They weren't like hanging out the whole time, is my guess. It would just make more sense that whenever they needed each other, they all got together for a big mission. And this was the final mission, this mission at the beginning of the movie. And then they parted ways. I don't have an issue with that. Clearly, Gunn and Waititi can't figure it out. So I split it down the middle, 2 years, and that's when they finally parted. I have no issue with that. And then the second issue, good old Groot, right? So he's a baby in October of 2014, Guardians 2. He's a teenager in May of 2018, Infinity War. He's blipped for 5 years, and then he's still a teenager in October of 2025 during Thor Love and Thunder. Then he's swole Groot, giant Groot, during December of 2025, during the holiday special, which, by the way, in the holiday special, Kraglin says he's just a kid. So that's interesting, right? He's a pretty big kid. But so anyway, then he shows up in Guardians 3, which we know is in August of 2026, and he pretty much hasn't changed at all. And then in the post-credit scene, which we don't know how far in the future that is, but holy mackerel, is he big. I mean, if this is the only major issue with the placement of Love and Thunder, I don't really care, right? It doesn't matter that much. I mean, he's a living tree. There's no predicting his growth patterns. I know some people have tried to draw a graph and put a lot of work into it, which I applaud, by the way. But the bottom line is, we don't know. We learned, the Watcher said he's the seed that saves the universe. So as we just learned in I Am Groot, episode 5 from season 2, there's something really special about him. But he's also been around Infinity Stones and around Star-Lord. And I mean, there's just all kinds of reasons he might have really, really massive growth spurts. So this doesn't bother me. Let me know what you think. If it bothers you, I'd love to know. But yeah, other than this and the weirdness of Thor being with the Guardians for so long, I think 2025 fits perfectly. And I think these 2 issues are not big enough to break the deal, if you will. And so, okay, this is the timeline that's on my Google Drive, and I will leave a pinned comment that will have a link to that if you want to go out there. And I've updated Iron Man 3, All Hail the King, and Winter Soldier, because those I mentioned in the previous video have changed. And then Phase 2 and most of Phase 3 have not changed. And then here is Phase 4, and notice Love and Thunder is now April to October of 2025. So, by the way, some people have complained and said, why does Disney Plus put it after She-Hulk? Because obviously you should watch it before She-Hulk because they mentioned Lady Thor. They're putting it there because that's when the majority of the movie happens in October. But personally, I don't know that the Disney Plus timeline is meant to be a watch order. I mean, you can watch it in that order. But I think really you would want to watch Thor, Love, and Thunder probably even before Moon Knight and Wakanda Forever. But definitely before She-Hulk. So anyway, just my opinion on that. And then there's Phase 5 as we have it so far. All right, so don't forget, we have the September contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, and I'll announce the winner in October. And then, of course, I always like to mention the Discord. Here we are talking about the timeline. Always the timeline, right? That's my favorite channel. But let me stress, there's tons of chats out there, tons of chats. But you know me, I love the timeline. I will leave a pinned comment that also has a link with an invitation so you can join if you'd like to be part of the conversation. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.